All right, so are you ready to dive into HAR?
Always ready for a good deep dive, especially into something like human activity recognition.
Ah,
Yeah, definitely sign me up.
I am super intrigued by this research paper that you sent over
Oh, yeah.
about HAR's potential in logistics.
Yeah.
I think it's going to tie really well
Yeah.
into our bigger conversation about Industry 4.0
Yeah.
versus 5.0.
It does. It really does.
So
Sometimes.
maybe for those who haven't been following along,
Yeah.
or maybe need a little bit of a refresher,
Sure.
can you remind us
Yeah.
what was Industry 4.0 all about?
Sure. So Industry 4.0, that was, the big push towards automation robots,
Yeah.
you know, um, bringing in all these new technologies into factories and manufacturing to kind of like supercharge everything and make it all like hyper efficient.
Okay, so it sounds like a lot of really cool technology,
It was.
a lot of potential,
Yeah.
but it sounds like maybe
Yeah.
it didn't quite live up to the hype.
Well, it's tricky because there were definitely a lot of advances, and it did change a lot of things, but
Yeah.
yet, like you said, it didn't quite. y- y- It's funny how these things always kind of fall short of the initial like hype,
Right.
and there were a few reasons for that. I think um, one of the things is that not every part of the world has the infrastructure to support all this super high tech stuff.
Right. So not everyone can just
Right.
suddenly have a smart factory.
Exactly, and then
Yeah.
there's the whole issue of like a lot of businesses these days thrive on like customization and personalized stuff.
Yeah. So like you're saying with 3D printing,
Yeah.
it can do amazing things, but if
Yeah.
you need a million of something,
Yeah.
it's not the right.
Exactly. It's
Okay.
not it's not going to be efficient for that.
So it sounds like there were some practical limitations,
Yeah.
and maybe we got a little bit ahead of ourselves
I think so. Yeah.
in terms of what the technology.
And the other thing too is like, the environmental impact of all this, that's become a bigger and bigger concern. So you have to factor that in as well.
Right. And
Yeah.
thinking about the people
Yeah.
involved in all of this.
Yeah. What about the workers? Right?
What about the workers if the robots are doing
Exactly.
everything?
Yeah, it's not exactly a recipe for job satisfaction if
Yeah.
everyone's getting replaced by,
Yeah.
a shiny metal arm.
So is that where Industry 5.0 comes in?
Yeah, it is.
Is it trying to bring humans back to the center?
Absolutely. It's
For-
all about collaboration.
Hmm.
Instead of replacement, it's saying, okay, how can we take the best of what humans can do and the best of what technology can do and like bring them together in this, symbiotic relationship where everyone kind of benefits.
Okay, I am officially intrigued. So HAR, human activity recognition.
Yeah.
Where does that fit in?
Well, HAR is like a key ingredient in this whole Industry 5.0 vision
Okay.
because it's all about understanding how humans move and work and then using that information to optimize, everything.
Okay, so before we get into chain HR and logistics and all of that,
Yeah.
what exactly is HAR?
So HAR, at its core, it uses sensors and algorithms to understand what a person is doing. But it's not just about, recognizing broad actions like walking or sitting. It's way more granular than that. It's about analyzing those tiny little motions within a task, like how you move your hands when you're, assembling something or, the subtle shifts in your posture when you're lifting something heavy. It's like having this X-ray vision into how we move.
So it's not just they're walking, but they're walking
We
with a
just-
limp and holding 3 boxes and
Yeah, it's that level of detail that makes it so powerful.
okay, and how does this relate to the research paper
Yeah.
that we're looking at today?
So they did this really cool study in a semiconductor IC design house
Okay.
using HAR to analyze like the workers' movements.
Okay, so we're not talking about like a factory floor.
Not a typical factory floor.
Why a semiconductor design place?
Well, you might be surprised, but the logistics involved in those kinds of high-tech environments are incredibly complex.
Okay.
You've got these tiny components. Everything has to be so precise.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of repetitive manual tasks that could really benefit from this kind of like HAR analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Plus errors in those settings can have huge consequences. So, finding ways to improve accuracy is critical.
So it's not just about speed, it's also
No.
about making sure that
And it's
everything's done correctly.
exactly minimizing those like, oops, I dropped a microchip moments.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So walk us through how they actually set this study up.
Okay, so they had 16 participants
Okay.
and they were mimicking real-world tasks like assembling those tiny components.
Okay.
And get this, they were all wearing these special suits
Okay.
equipped with sensors from a company called XSNS.
Okay.
And these suits captured all this detailed movement data. It was like motion capture for movies,
Mhm.
but designed for like analyzing real-world work.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's pretty high tech, right?
Yeah, so they've got everyone suited up.
Yeah.
They're doing these tasks.
Uh-huh.
What did they do with all that information?
Well, they took all that fancy motion capture data
Mm-hmm.
and they combined it with some more traditional like motion and time study techniques.
So they brought in like a stopwatch and
Basically, yeah.
an old school engineer.
Imagine like, an old school engineer with a stopwatch carefully observing and timing every single movement. That's basically what they did, but way more precise in detail thanks to those sensors.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And then what did they do?
Okay, so this is where the magic of machine learning comes in.
Okay.
They took all this data and they fed it into different machine learning models to see, what kind of insights they could uncover.
Okay, and remind us,
Yeah.
what kind of machine learning models?
So they used a few different ones.
Okay.
They used SVM, RF, NB, and even the more complex LSTM.
Okay, so in really, really simple terms,
Yeah.
what are those?
Okay, so think of them as like super-powered pattern detectors, SVM, RF, and NB. Those are all kind of like straightforward models that are really good at classifying data into different categories.
Okay.
So in this case, they'd be trying to categorize, different hand movements based on the sensor data.
Okay.
LSTM, that's a bit more sophisticated. It's designed to analyze sequences of data, so it's really good at understanding how movements like unfold over time.
Okay, that makes sense. So like one is saying,
Yeah.
this is a twist, this
Yeah.
is a turn.
Exactly.
And the other one's saying, this is how the twist led to the turn.
Exactly. You got it.
Okay.
So, but here's the interesting thing in this study. The simpler models actually outperformed the LSTM.
Really?
Yeah.
You would think that the more complex...
You would think
Right.
it'll be better.
Yeah. So this is one of the interesting findings of this study.
So what happened?
Well, it all comes down to the specific task and the type of data. Remember how we talked about HAR being able to recognize those tiny, subtle movements?
Well, it turns out those simpler models were actually better at picking up on those nuances. LSTM is great for analyzing like big, distinct actions. But when it comes to those fine-grained hand movements, the simply models actually had the edge.
Okay, so simpler
Yeah.
isn't always worse.
Sometimes simpler is better.
It depends on
So
what you're trying to do.
Exactly. It all depends on the context.
So besides
Yeah.
the machine learning model showdown,
Yeah.
were there any other big findings?
Yeah. So one of the most significant findings was that these models could actually detect when participants messed up the task,
Yeah.
even if it was a tiny error.
So they could tell if somebody was doing something
Yeah.
a little bit off.
Even a little bit off just from their movement.
And that could be super helpful for
yeah.
training and all sorts of things.
Absolutely. Imagine the possibilities for training and performance improvement. If you can pinpoint those tiny errors in real time, you can provide workers with instant feedback and help them, avoid those mistakes in the future.
So it's like having a digital coach.
Exactly. Right there with you.
Exactly. It's like having a coach who's not just watching from the sidelines, but is actually using data to help you, improve your game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Couldn't that feel a little bit
Oh, yeah. I know what you're going to say.
big brotherish?
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And it's something we definitely need to be mindful of as this technology becomes more pervasive. But remember, the whole point of this is to empower workers, not to micromanage them. The goal isn't to create a surveillance state in the workplace.
Right. It's to understand where people are
Uh,
having issues.
to
And
be
maybe we
good.
can improve the process.
Exactly. It's about using this data to understand how we can better support workers and create a more, efficient and humane environment for everyone.
Okay, so it's not about catching people doing things wrong.
Right.
It's about figuring out how
How can we help?
to help people do things better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting shifting perspective.
So we've gone from robots taking over the world
Right.
to robots helping us out.
Yeah. To be better.
It's a more optimistic vision, I think.
Yeah. So where do we go from here?
Well, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we've seen how HAR can be applied in, a high-tech setting like this, but the potential applications are vast. We're talking healthcare, manufacturing, training athletes, helping people recover from injuries. I mean, basically any fields where human movement matters, HAR has the potential to revolutionize how we do things.
Yeah, it's super exciting. But before we get too carried away,
Sure.
let's bring it back to this research
Yeah.
and see what else we can uncover.
Absolutely. There's so much more to unpack here, from the specific findings of this study to, the potential impact on worker training and workplace design. And of course, we can't forget about those ethical considerations.
Hmm.
We need to make sure we're using this powerful technology responsibly and thoughtfully.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive back in.
Let's do it. One thing that really jumped out at me from this paper was
Yeah.
how it kind of changes the way we think about like worker monitoring.
Yeah.
It's not about Big Brother watching your every move.
Yeah.
It's more about using data to see where people might need some extra help or where the process itself could be, tweaked.
So instead of being like a surveillance tool,
Right.
it's more of like an empowerment tool.
Exactly. It's like a shift in the way we think about it.
Yeah, so like instead of like you messed up, it's more like, hey,
Right.
I noticed you're having trouble with this one step.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, I notice you're consistently having trouble with this one step. Maybe we
Mhm.
can figure out a better way to do it. Or, it seems like you're getting fatigued toward the end of your shift. Maybe we can adjust the workflow,
Yeah.
to kind of like distribute the workload more evenly.
Yeah, and that could be especially useful for training new people.
Oh, absolutely.
Instead of just throwing them in and
Like
then
a-
saying good luck.
It's like you've got this constant feedback loop.
Yeah, and you can even tailor
Exactly.
the training to the person.
Absolutely. You could create personalized training programs based on, how each individual is moving and what their strengths and weaknesses are.
Okay, so we've talked about efficiency. We've
What?
talked about training.
Yeah.
What about safety?
Oh, yeah, that's a huge one.
Because you would think
Yeah.
that this kind of information could be.
Yeah. Think about industries where, repetitive strain injuries are a big problem.
Like pretty much every.
Yeah, exactly. And HAR could be used to detect those early signs of fatigue or strain so you can intervene before it becomes a serious issue.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. And it could also be used to identify those risky movement patterns that might lead to accidents so you can design the work environment in a way that minimizes those risks.
So it's not just about like optimizing
No, it's about safety too.
your person.
It's about worker well-being. It's about protecting people.
Okay, so less robots taking our jobs.
Right.
More robots helping us not get
Exactly.
injured at work.
Exactly. That's a much better way to frame it.
Okay, so this is all sounding very utopian.
I know it does sound a little too good to be true, right?
Are there any downsides to this?
Well, of course, there are potential challenges.
Yeah.
It's not all sunshine and roses.
Yeah.
One of the biggest ones is data privacy.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
If companies are collecting all this detailed information about how their workers are moving, they need to be very transparent about how that data is being used, who has access to it, and how it's being protected.
And the workers need to
Yeah.
feel comfortable.
They need to trust that their privacy is being respected and that, this isn't being used against them in any way.
Yeah, or that it's being used for something
Yeah.
other than what they were told.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about building trust
Yeah.
and making sure that workers feel like they're part of the process, not just, subjects in some experiment.
Okay, so data privacy is
Yeah.
a big one.
A big one for sure.
Are there other things we need to think about?
Yeah. Another thing is how this data is being interpreted and used.
Hmm.
We can't just blindly rely on algorithms. We need to remember that human judgment is still important.
Mm-hmm.
A machine might flag something as an error, but a human supervisor might look at it and say, oh, no, that's actually a creative workaround,
Right.
or that's a sign that the process itself needs to be adjusted.
Right, or they're just really good
It-
at their job,
Right.
and they've found
They found a better way to do it.
a shortcut.
Yeah, exactly.
So human oversight.
Absolutely. We need that human element in there.
Any other red flags?
Well, another thing that often gets overlooked is the potential for bias in algorithms.
Yeah.
If the training data isn't diverse enough, the models might end up, unfairly penalizing certain workers or groups.
Oh, so like if they're only training it on...
Yeah, exactly. If you're only training it on data from, mostly male workers, it might not accurately recognize the movements of female workers, which could lead to, biased performance evaluations and things like that.
So that's something we need to be really careful about.
We need to be very mindful of that and make sure that, we're not just perpetuating those existing biases or creating new ones.
So it sounds like with all of this,
Yeah.
we need to be asking the right questions.
Yeah.
Making sure that we're doing this.
Yeah, it's not just about the technology itself, it's about how we use it,
Right, and that we're doing it.
And that requires those open and honest conversations. Yeah. About the potential benefits and risks and clear guidelines and regulations to make sure it's being used responsibly.
Okay, so this research paper has given us
Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
a lot to think about.
It is.
But what I'm really interested in is,
Yeah.
okay, this is all well and good, but what does it mean
Yeah.
for the future of work?
Yeah, that's the big question, right?
Like, are we headed towards this utopian future where work is more fulfilling and efficient? Or are we headed towards this dystopian world where we're all being monitored and controlled by algorithms?
Right. Well, I think it's probably going to be somewhere in between. It's never quite as good or as bad as we imagine it.
Right.
But this research definitely gives me some hope.
Yeah.
It shows that this technology can be used to empower workers and to create a more humane work environment. And that's really encouraging.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that technology doesn't have to be this dehumanizing force.
Yeah.
It can actually be used to enhance our humanity and create a better world.
Yeah, so it's not us versus the machines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's us working with the machine
Us and the machines
to create something better.
to create a better future.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
But how do we get there?
Right. That's the challenge.
Like, what are the questions that we...
One of the big ones is, how do we make sure that the benefits of this technology are shared equitably? How do we prevent it from becoming something that just widens the gap between, the haves and the have-nots?
Right, so we need to make sure.
We need to make sure everyone has access
Everyone has access to the benefit.
to those opportunities.
Yeah. And not just the people who are already...
Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't want to exacerbate those existing inequalities.
And what about the people
Oh,
whose jobs are affected by this?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
If this leads to increased automation, what happens to those workers who are displaced? Do they have the skills and support they need to transition to those new roles?
So it's not just about the technology itself.
No, it's about the whole ecosystem.
It's about thinking about
Yeah.
the people who are
The people who are going to be impacted by it.
affected by it.
Yeah. It's about investing in workforce development, creating new pathways for education and training, fostering a culture of lifelong learning. It's a big shift in how we think about work.
Right. Instead of being afraid of it,
Exactly.
we need to think about
I need to embrace it.
how we can use it to our advantage.
We need to be proactive.
Yeah. Okay, so this research paper has
Yeah.
given us a lot of high-level ideas
Yeah.
about the future of work.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
But what are some things that we can actually apply right now?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Like, what are the concrete takeaways?
Yeah, what can we actually do with this information?
This study.
So one of the key takeaways is that this technology can be a really powerful tool for understanding and improving human performance.
Okay.
But it's not a magic bullet.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be used thoughtfully and intentionally with a clear understanding of its limitations and, potential biases.
So it's not just slap it on
Exactly. You can't just slap it on and hope for the best.
and hope everything's going to be...
It requires careful planning
Okay.
and data analysis, expertise, and ongoing evaluation, to make sure the system's working as intended and that it's actually benefiting the workers it's designed to support.
So we need to constantly be
Mhm.
checking it, making sure that it's like doing what it's supposed to.
It's not a one-time thing. It's about continuous improvement.
Okay. So thoughtful, intentional,
Yeah.
ongoing.
Keep refining.
Are there any other practical takeaways?
Yeah. This study also highlights the importance of combining different approaches. They didn't just rely on the fancy motion capture data. They also brought in those more traditional motion and time study techniques. That combination allowed them to get a much more nuanced understanding of, how the workers were moving and where there was room for improvement.
So it's not about ditching the old ways.
Right.
It's about finding ways to blend them
It's about finding those synergies.
with the new ways.
Exactly. It's the best of both worlds.
I like that, a hybrid approach.
Yeah, it seems like that's kind of a recurring theme in this whole conversation.
Yeah.
It's not about humans versus machines. It's about humans and machines working together
To create something better.
to create something better. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
We've talked about the potential benefits, the potential risks.
Yeah.
As we kind of wrap up this section,
Yeah.
what are your final thoughts?
Well, I think we're really just at the beginning of this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
As this technology continues to advance and become more accessible, we're going to see it being used in more and more ways. But it's crucial that we proceed with caution, and that we always keep that human element at the forefront of our minds.
Mm-hmm.
The goal shouldn't be to create a world where machines replace humans, but rather a world where humans and machines can collaborate to create a more equitable, more sustainable, and ultimately more fulfilling future of work for everyone.
Yeah, and that's what's exciting about this.
Yeah, that's what gets me excited about it too.
It's not all doom and gloom.
No, it's not. It's actually quite optimistic, I think.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing your insights with us today.
It's been a pleasure.
This whole thing kind of makes you rethink that whole, robots are going to take our jobs thing.
Yeah, it does, doesn't
It
it?
seems like a very different
Yeah.
narrative.
It's a much more positive narrative.
Yeah.
I think it's really exciting to see this shift, from this fear of automation to this idea that technology can actually, work alongside humans and enhance our skills and maybe even create new opportunities.
Yeah, and maybe even create better jobs.
Exactly. Jobs that are more engaging, more meaningful, you
More
know?
creative.
Yeah, exactly. And let's not forget about the bottom line. If companies can use this technology to, boost efficiency and worker performance, that translates into cost savings.
Right, for sure.
Reduced errors, faster training times, smoother workflow, all of that adds up.
And happier workers.
Happier workers, exactly.
Right.
So it's a win-win situation potentially.
But it sounds like
Yeah.
we need to be careful that it's a win-win.
Exactly. We can't just, focus on the profits and forget about the people.
Right. It needs to be good.
It has to be a win-win for everyone involved.
For
The
everyone.
businesses and the workers.
Okay. So this research paper has been awesome.
It has. It's been really thought-provoking.
Yeah. As we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you want people to remember?
I think the most important thing is that, this technology, like any powerful technology, it comes with opportunities and responsibilities.
Yeah.
It's up to all of us, businesses, policymakers, workers, to have these conversations, to think about the ethical implications,
Yeah.
and to make sure we're using it in a way that benefits everyone.
Yeah, for sure. We can't just assume it's going to be a good thing. We have to be
We have to be intentional about it.
intentional. Yeah. And if you're listening to this
Yeah.
and you're as excited about this as we are,
Yeah.
we encourage you to check out the research paper
Definitely. There's a lot more detail in there.
and see how you can apply this
And let us know what you think.
to your own work.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
So, as we sign off,
Yeah.
what is your final thought for our listeners?
My final thought is this. As this technology keeps getting better and better, let's make sure we're asking the right questions. It's not just about what can this technology do, but it's also about how can we use it to make the world a better place? How can we use it to create a better future for everyone?
That is a great question, and that's something for everyone to think about.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a great conversation, and we will catch you next time for another deep dive.
See you then.